Hey, good morning. I'm Dr. Steve Stites, Chief Medical Officer here at the University of Kansas Health System and Executive Vice Chancellor at the University of Kansas Medical Center. Welcome back to Open Mics with Dr. Stites. When we talk about Parkinson's disease, we usually focus on the motor symptoms. That's the tremor, stiff muscles, and difficulty walking that most people associate with Parkinson's. Most patients, though, and their loved ones know to expect these physical symptoms. But mental symptoms, like delusions and hallucinations related to Parkinson's, can catch patients by surprise. Today we're exploring these hidden burdens of Parkinson's disease. We'll ask how to recognize and talk about delusions and hallucinations, and we'll learn how someone can get treated for these symptoms as soon as possible. And I hope that we can destigmatize one of the toughest parts of Parkinson's disease. Joining me today is Dr. Rajesh Pahwa, a movement disorder specialist and one of the leading Parkinson's disease researchers in the country. He is the director of the Parkinson's and Movement Disorder Division here at the University of Kansas Health System. Dr. Pahwa, great to have you. Great to have you back, actually.
Thank you for having me.
I do bug him occasionally with some of my patients, so I really appreciate this opportunity to get to talk to you. Joining us via webcam are Ralph and Brenda Ruckman. Ralph is a dentist, or we may be calling him Dr. Ruckman, who's been living with Parkinson's for at least 16 years now and eventually had to retire from his practice. He says he couldn't have made it this far without the love and support of Brenda, who's handling a lot of daily caregiving. Good morning to you both, Dr. Ruckman and Brenda. How are you doing today?
We're doing good, thank you.
Doing fine, thanks for asking.
And we're delighted to have you. Now, Dr. Pahwa, is there an estimate of how many Parkinson's patients develop delusions and hallucinations?
Yes, we do know that approximately 50% of the Parkinson's patients at some stage of the disease may have hallucinations or delusions. They may not be really bad that they need to be treated, but a large number of patients will have some degree of these.
So let's clarify for just a moment. Now, hallucinations are things that involve the five senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or feeling. Something that's not there. So within those five senses, you've got a sense that something's there, but really it's not. But delusions, those relate to your thoughts and emotions. This image shows Parkinson's delusions can be jealousy, persecutory, or reference delusions. So can you talk to us about what that means?
Yes, so when we talk about hallucinations, the most common is visual. So people may see little children, little people coming out of woodworks, they could see dogs, they could see monsters, and that's in about 70% of the hallucinations are visual. But people at times can have auditory ones. The auditory ones are not like someone talking to them, it's more like a music, a religious hymn that might be going on. So they don't quite understand what that sound that they're hearing is about. Of course, tactile, they may feel someone touching them, and they look back and there is no one there. And smell, normally in Parkinson's you lose smell, and some patients suddenly start smelling things that are not there. So all these hallucinations can happen, with the visual one being the most common. Now, delusions are the ones which can be really urgently needed treated, because people may believe things that are not true. They may think a spouse, they have been married for 50 years, every time they go out, they're trying to go meet their partner or trying to meet having an affair or something. They may feel someone is stealing from them. If they're in a nursing home, they may think the nurses are actually talking about them. So all these can be really bothersome for them and can really affect their quality of life. And some people may actually run out of the house in the middle of the night thinking that these delusions are real, the spouse is trying to hurt them, or someone in the house is trying to hurt them.
Wow, that can be really hard, that kind of delusional thinking and so paranoid and persecutory, as you mentioned. So just the curiosity, how does Parkinson's cause that? Because I always think of it as a movement disorder, stiff muscles, trouble swallowing, sometimes moving a lot. How does it cause these delusions and hallucinations?
Right. So, we have for a long time talked about dopamine as the main neurochemical that's involved in Parkinson's disease. And yes, dopamine is involved. It is involved with movement. But there are certain parts of the brain where dopamine can actually cause hallucinations and delusions. Then there are other chemicals that are also involved in Parkinson's disease, such as serotonin. Now, that can also cause hallucinations. There are other chemicals, that's glutamate. Similarly, that can cause hallucinations too. So there are multiple chemicals that are involved in the brain that, as the disease is progressive, can cause hallucinations. The Parkinson's medications that act on dopamine can also worsen these hallucinations. The challenge has been so far, Parkinson's patients don't have enough dopamine. And the medications that are used for psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia block the dopamine. So we were concerned about using medications that would block the dopamine to help the hallucinations because it would worsen their motor features.
So dopamine is a big feature of, or the lack of dopamine is a big feature of Parkinson's, but these other chemicals can also be a feature of Parkinson's, and the drugs used to treat Parkinson's can also diminish these other chemicals. Well, that's got to be a challenge. Now, do Parkinson's patients typically know that this can happen, and how often do these symptoms actually come about with these patients?
So, often we have found out patients, at least earlier on, do not talk about these hallucinations. One, it happens once in a while. Maybe they're in the hospital, they see certain things, and once they go out of the hospital, they are not. When they go to the physician, they don't know if that's related to their Parkinson's. They may not talk about it. They may forget about it when they get to the physician. Oh, I had hallucinations at that part. Or they may basically not want to talk about it, especially if they are having delusions like the spouse is having an affair. They don't want to talk about that to anyone. So there are a number of reasons that the patients may not actually talk about these hallucinations or delusions.
Yeah. So now, what about the impact on the caregivers too? It's got to be easy, or it's not easy, looking out for someone who isn't fully in touch with reality or whose delusions may be about you.
Yes. So this can really be a big challenge, and we do know that once the hallucinations and delusions begin, it really increases the caregiver burden significantly. It may start off with simple things, the person saying, oh, look at that dog, and the spouse trying to convince them, or the caregiver trying to convince them there is not a dog there. And that could lead to fights. It's like, you don't believe me, I've been married to you for 50 years, I'm telling you there's a dog in the house. So that itself can create a problem. The other thing is the caregiver might think this disease is now progressing too fast, and that may also make them feel more worried. It really affects the relationship between the caregiver and the patient, and this leads to a lot of depression and anxiety with the caregiver too. So this is not just the patients having these issues, the caregiver also gets into stations related to the hallucinations and delusions.
All right, well, let's hear now from Dr. Ruckman and Brenda. Guys, take us back to the original diagnosis of Parkinson's. I think it was in 2008, but Brenda, you said you noticed subtle signs before the diagnosis was made. Tell us about what you noticed.
Well, he kind of had a faraway look, well, his mom died of a glioblastoma tumor, brain tumor, and he had this kind of faraway look, and he kind of would cup his hand, his left hand in his lap, kind of shuffled sometimes. I really thought maybe he had a brain tumor, and so he had a CT scan, everything was fine, and I noticed a little bit of confusion at times, and so we went to his regular doctor. He sent us to a neurologist that didn't know what it could be, and so I'm so thankful we got referred to Dr. Pawa, and he knew right away at that first appointment that he had Parkinson's, and he started him on medication right away. But yeah, that's what I noticed, was just he was just doing things that didn't seem like, it looked like something was wrong.
Now, you told us that the carbidopa-levodopa was managing the symptoms for years, but am I correct, Dr. Ruckman, that you had never really experienced tremors per se? Is that right?
Not really, no. I had always been able to say, well, I'm really fortunate because, I put my hand out there. You can get close up and you can't see any tremor.
Dr. Pawa, is that unusual in Parkinson's? Because I know that Ralph still has a movement disorder involving his head. Talk us about the difference between the tremors and what we might have called torticollis or something else. Yeah.
Right. So no, in about 20 to 25% of the patients, they may never have any tremors. So, and often what happens if a patient doesn't have tremor, it takes a little longer to be diagnosed with Parkinson's, because tremor being such an obvious symptom that as soon as a tremor begins, people are more likely to be diagnosed with it. The tremor, when we talk about, is a pretty rhythmic tremor. Like, you can predict what my next movement is going to be. The other thing is dyskinesias, which you see right now Ralph is having a little bit of. Those are due to the levodopa itself, which are random dance-like movements, and that is from the medication, as opposed to tremors, which is due to lack of medications usually.
All right, now Brenda, toward the end of last year, Ralph started experiencing hallucinations. Tell us what you first noticed.
He would tell me in the morning that that people were all over in our room, in our living room area, and I was like, well, what are they doing? And he said, they're sleeping. I can hardly get around in my walker because I'm afraid I'm gonna bump into somebody. And I asked him, well, do you know who they are? And they were he would name family members. And so then I was very gentle every time I did know that there were hallucinations associated with Parkinson's, just from stuff I had read and people I knew whose mom or dad had Parkinson's and they struggled with that. But I was very gentle with them, and I'd say, no, nobody's there, let's walk around, I'll show you, nobody's here. And then he would say, oh, okay, I guess I'm just seeing things.
So now you clearly helped bring him back to reality, so to speak. But Dr. Ruckman, were you able to comprehend that what you were seeing wasn't really there, that your mind was trying to play a trick on you?
Yes, I did. I don't know why, but when Brenda would explain to me that there was nobody there and she'd take me around, show me, it didn't take too long before I realized that there was something that was going on that I wasn't really aware of or didn't anticipate. And so as I was contemplating it and just letting it sink in, the idea of being a Parkinson's patient was in itself enough of a shock to the system that I was inclined to listen to my caretaker, because she had no reason to lie to me. And then one thing that I found is there was something kind of odd about this whole scenario, and there was some unique situations where I found myself in where the people that were supposedly in the room, they were like, well, how can I say it? And they were like cartoon characters for me. They had a tendency to be like if I would touch them or reach or turn around to look at them, they disappeared. And they were very elusive.
Yeah, that would be kind of a hard thing to deal with. So now I get you all went to talk to your doctors, and I suspect you mentioned this to Dr. Pawa and the team. Tell us about that conversation. How did that go? What did you tell them?
I think by the time we actually talked to him, when we had our appointment, he was starting to see like bad things, people in our house. He was having really scary dreams, or I don't know if they were hallucinations during the night or if they were actually dreams, but he was very frightened a lot in the morning, during the night. And I started sleeping. He sleeps in his lift chair in our family room, so I started sleeping out there. And he also needed more help during the night too when he got up. And So anyway, I would hear him yell out during the night. And so I'd wake him up and tell him he was having a bad dream. But yeah, he started seeing the things in our house that it started out, with people he knew, dogs, stuff, and then it got scarier. And that's when, by the time we had our next appointment, that's when we talked to Dr. Pawa.
So, Dr. Pawa, if someone's having these symptoms, tell us what you learn about them. How do you treat them? How does this go?
So first of all, before every visit, we do ask our patients if they're having any hallucinations. In other words, are they seeing things? Are they believing things that are not true? So even if a patient is not comfortable discussing this with us, they actually put it on the paper, and then we can discuss. But initially, when they have the hallucinations, they are more pleasant. It's a friendly dog. It's there once in a while. They know it's not real. But as it advances, it becomes more unreal. They lose this insight that these are hallucinations. They actually start believing that this is dog, and the dog may become unfriendly and is trying to attack them. So those things really make it that we need to do something more urgently. A lot of patients, when they're just having mild hallucinations, it doesn't bother them. They don't want to actually take any treatment. We may try to cut back some of their medicine, but often what happens if we cut back their Parkinson medicine, then their symptoms get worse. So it's one of those things we have to balance them. Once we get to the point that there are hallucinations, we first make sure there's no medical reason for it. They don't have the flu, they don't have a bladder infection, they don't have any medical reason that precipitated the hallucination. If there is no medical reason, we at times try to see, is there room to take away some of the medication? If a patient on a narcotic medication, for example, we may try to get rid of it. We may try to reduce some of their Parkinson medicine. But if that doesn't happen, then we actually use medications to treat the hallucinations. In the good old days, we used to use medications. Those are used for schizophrenia. Even though they were effective, they did worsen Parkinson's. There are two medications we still use in some patients. One is called quetiapine, and one is called clozapine. There is data that it may help, and it may not worsen Parkinson's as much. However, a few years ago, the FDA approved our first medications for hallucinations specific for Parkinson's disease, called pimavanserin or Nuplazid.
Okay,
And that is
you're
usually
say that one again, pimavanserin?
Yeah, pimavanserin.
Hey, I got that. That's pretty good.
That's right.
All right, not bad for an old guy. Go ahead.
I know. Or the commercial name being Nuplazid. So that's usually the one we often start with once a patient starts having hallucinations.
And that seems to work more effectively. Does it treat schizophrenia at all?
So right now there is no data to show that it works for schizophrenia, and it's not approved for schizophrenia.
Interesting. Okay, so Dr. Ruckman, Brenda, you recently started using Nuplazid. Is it too early to find any changes, any hope, or how's that going?
Well, I wanted to share something really quick.
Please.
A few days before he started on Nuplazid, we were waiting for it to get here. He, as Dr. Pawa mentioned, sometimes they run out of the house at night, they're scared, and that happened to us. And I was actually sleeping out there, and he somehow he got out of his chair without me hearing him, and he ran out the front door, and you gotta remember that he did not do well during the night, but his adrenaline was so high because of the scary things he saw in our house. And he ran outside, and he was running to his cousin's house. He lives about a half a mile away. And on the way running, he remembers falling like 5 or 6 times, and he ended up just having really bad skin abrasions, but it was a miracle he didn't have a concussion or broken bones. But anyway, I was outside a minute later, and I could not find him. I didn't look way down the street. I didn't think he'd be running. Anyway, so that did happen, and that was very, very scary. And the ambulance took him to the emergency room, and they sent us home because he didn't have anything bad that happened. But yes, so now that he's on Nuplazid, it'll be, it was 3 weeks yesterday. He says he's not seeing hallucinations during the day. He still sees some at night, and he feels someone laying beside him in his chair a lot, and which is very unnerving. And so anyway, it is better, and we have hope that 6 weeks is full effect. We're hoping that it will actually help him and he can overcome all the hallucinations and feelings. I didn't even know that when you had people with hallucinations could feel anything. I had no clue about that. That was new to me. But we have hope that it'll get better and better, and then they'll be gone.
Well, that's a pretty terrifying story, to lose somebody you love so much and have them out there struggling and suffering. That's a hard one. So now, Dr. Pawa, the FDA approved another new Parkinson's disease medication, as I understand, SPN 830. Talk to us a little bit about what that.
So its commercial name is Onapgo, so that's a little easier on the tongue.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a hard one. Go ahead. Onapgo. Gotcha.
Yes.
Onapgo.
So as you know, in Parkinson's disease, as the disease advances, the motor symptoms get on a roller coaster during the day. Times when the medications work, times when the medications don't work. Kind of similar to diabetes, where the blood sugar fluctuates during the day. And just like a diabetic pump, the FDA approved Onapgo, which kind of gives the medications continuously under the skin. And the idea behind it is to cut down these roller coasters during the day for our patients.
Wow. And will that help both the movement part and the hallucinations and delusions?
So, it is approved for the motor part, not the hallucinations or delusions. But we have to see what happens to the hallucinations and delusions in patients with Parkinson's. The results from Europe and from clinical trials has been that it causes less hallucinations. But again, all Parkinson's medications can potentially cause hallucinations and delusions.
All right. Well, I hope that works great. And Dr. Ruckman, I understand you have a kind of a pump like that on. Is that right?
Yes. I don't imagine you can hear it.
You can see it though.
But it looks like a big cell phone, and it has some. One of the nice features is you can give yourself some extra doses that may on the spot give you some relief and make it a little easier for you when you're out and about, or when you're just trying to be focused and do what you can to well, as you can see, the typical thing is not always remembering what you just said, and
yeah.
I chuckle. I try to keep it light and lively for myself and those that I've got some wonderful friends, and it's a support group that I know not everyone has. And I just found out another friend of mine, I just had lunch with him yesterday. He's been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and so there's 4 of us now that are friends, and we all have Parkinson's. And what are the odds of that?
Well, at least you have a friend group that understands what you're going through, and that is priceless. So, all right, we're here to answer your questions. Send them in using the links on your screen with YouTube, Facebook, or email the Medical News Network. Let's check in with Doc Hawk. Doc, there's your cool music, and I love the little the bird, the wings there. That's just awesome. All right, now the flu season has been nasty this year, but we're hopefully seeing a decrease. And we've had a lot of admissions and stuff, so walk us through the graph.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. I mean, I think throughout our country there has been high levels. There was a peak level and that seemed to drop off, and then unfortunately we reached a second peak. And if you can see that red line there with the big arrow, you can see that high peak there that has occurred after an initial peak, which is similar to other years. Certainly we know that in influenza, respiratory viral seasons, we can have multiple peaks. Typically we have one, occasionally we'll have 2. We had a second one this year. Hopefully we don't get a third, but you can see overall that the circulation of the virus in the community is decreasing. This is a graph showing about the people who are going to emergency departments or clinics for ILI, which is influenza-like illness. The vast majority of those, again, are going to be influenza, COVID, and RSV. So we are seeing some improvement now. This was reported from data a week ago. Now we have our local health system, particularly our hospital data, showing, just like you said, a lot of influenza admissions. And you can see that on the blue bar there on those graphs. You can see it peaked out at around 46 or 47 admissions a couple weeks ago. It has since gone down to over 40 admissions last week. But overall, Steve, just like you said, this has been a pretty bad year for influenza circulation in the community. I know we've all had friends or family who have been ill, or even clusters of illness within those groups as well.
Yeah, and we know that COVID just has not been that bad this year, which hopefully means it's kind of running cycle. It'll stay calmer. It still can be a very bad disease for people. We still have COVID deaths, but nothing like what we've had in the past. So influenza has been a much bigger challenge this year for whatever reason. And we know that influenza mutates every year, and this has been a difficult year for us.
Yeah, for sure, and that is coupled with overall vaccine low uptake, but especially for influenza vaccine, low uptake of that vaccine. Now, in any given year, we know that the vaccine can help reduce your chance of going to the hospital or severe illness by 30 to 50%. I guess there was some interim data showing it's more on that 30% side as far as reduction of severe illness. But we know that the vaccine can help reduce your chance of illness and those complications. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I was seeing a patient in their young 30s who had influenza, was not vaccinated, had influenza, felt better after a couple days, and then soon after that felt a lot worse. Ended up coming into the hospital with a severe bacterial pneumonia, a lot of destruction to the lung. So we know that you can have those complications of secondary bacterial infection, especially with pneumonia as well.
And that really occurs a lot with influenza, and that's going to be one of the primary modes it does. So let's talk about measles for just a moment. The CDC is tracking several small outbreaks around the country. But there is a not so small outbreak in West Texas and eastern New Mexico right now. Talk to us. What's going on there?
Yeah, you know, this is really unique. Again, this is in a community in West Texas, in that area of New Mexico. There have been actually now, most updated figures are 124 cases that they've diagnosed, and they've had like 18 hospitalizations. So it's just under that 20% mark for hospitalizations, which is typically, we say, about 1 to 5 people with measles will go to the hospital. Unfortunately, we know that vaccines can help reduce the disease process in the person, but also helps stop the spread in the community. That's where we have that herd immunity. So we know that in that outbreak, most of those patients are unvaccinated. I think out of 124 cases, there were only 5 that were unvaccinated. And so we do understand that this is a very easily transmitted disease to other people, and we know that if you come into contact with it, more than 90% of the time you will be infected, and that's what we're seeing here when we are dealing with unvaccinated populations. And we talked about the herd immunity. That's because typically we like 95% vaccination rates or immunity within a community. That is really what helps block the transmission to others, especially those at highest risk, those with immune suppression and things of that nature. But we know from the records of kindergarten enrollees that percentage of vaccinated people in that county was significantly lower. I think it was in the low 80s. So we know that because of that low vaccination rate in the community, it's very easy to get onward transmission to other people.
And it's interesting, you know, the MMR, if I remember right, has been around since the 60s or even before. It's been around for, do you remember exactly how long it's been out there?
So people who were born before 1957 are considered immune because it was everybody seemed to get it. It was around that time, 1956, they were still using a killed vaccine, but soon after that, in 57, 58 and onward, really had the whole live virus vaccine. So it was really from that point on, that late 50s, where we had vaccination, and you can tell if you look at some of those graphs about the amount of cases of measles as well as deaths, those significantly, precipitously dropped off once the measles vaccine was rolled out to the public. And we should say unfortunately, there are still concerns about causing autism. Those notions about MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine causing autism have been debunked multiple times with nearly 20 or more good peer-reviewed articles showing how that initial statement by that physician was completely untrue, was not supported by data. It is an extremely safe, extremely efficacious vaccine, and would continue to encourage people to get it.
Just a couple of thoughts, Joe. This vaccine has been around for over 65 years, and suddenly, after people got mad about vaccination for reasons I still don't quite understand, with COVID, now they want to attack the MMR vaccine. And all that does is save lives and saves your children from long-term problems as related to the measles. And as you point out, it does not cause autism. Autism has been around for how old is humanity, right? That's how long autism is around. And instead, we want to blame it on the MMR, which is just to borrow a favorite term, poppycock. And so we're going to listen to stupid internet science, also known as CIS, and instead of listening to peer-reviewed real science and the marked success, including what we see right now in Texas and New Mexico, where it's the unvaccinated children who are vulnerable.
Yes, and I would say too that unfortunately, just like you said, it is those children who are unable to make those decisions for themselves who are going to be the most vulnerable and suffer the most from these consequences of not being vaccinated, unfortunately. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they can get a handle on it and stem the tide of the exposures, but we also know that a couple universities in Texas have also put on notice about exposures in their communities as well.
So, and it's incredibly easy. It's like so much easier even than COVID to spread from one person to another. So, all right, we know you have questions. So Alexis is in our studio waiting anxiously for us to stop talking so she can ask some really good questions.
Well, first, I wish I could reach through the screen and give Brenda a hug. Because,
I know, right?
Oh my goodness, it's so clear, Brenda, why Ralph said when we first talked to him on the phone that you're a comfort and you've been his rock. The way you describe guiding him through that first experience with hallucinations is so gentle and so beautiful, and through something so hard for both of you. So, Brenda, I'm sure there's a lot of people wanting to hug you right now. Marcia has a comment she'd like me to share. Marcia writes, the transparency of the couple in discussing this disease is so valuable, not only for information, but also as a demonstration of how it is possible to live with Parkinson's together.
Yeah.
Jean has a question.
I'll just tell you, Brenda, as a physician, when you see, and Ralph, when you see patients out there in your office, and they come alone with a difficult disease, and you know they're alone trying to deal with that disease, it makes finding hope a lot harder. And when you see people who have a family and support team around them, it just makes all the difference in the world for how people can cope and maintain a degree of happiness and hope that is, I mean, we just have to cherish that, and we see it all the time in medicine. But a shout out to you and to Ralph, because it takes two in this situation. So,
such good partners.
May I share something?
Please.
Yes.
When I first started getting these hallucinations, I found that was really rather disconcerting because it was so real. And Brenda convinced me, because I trust her, that was big for me, that I was able to rely on her and give up on my false sense of reality. And once I realized that, then I was rather amazed at, how real it really was. And then, I started to open up about it, and I shared some things with Dr. Pawa, and it really wasn't easy because I didn't want anybody thinking I was crazy. And so there's that's one of the reasons why I was able to open up about it, was because I trusted my wife implicitly. It took me a while to get there completely, but it happened, and so I'm grateful for the reality that I'm aware of now, and it does help me to be more open about it. And but I'll tell you what, it was so real that it did cause me to do a little track running at night about 2 in the morning, and that was, when I look back at that was a scary thing to think about as well.
Well, it's life-threatening. All you have to do is run in front of a car, and then
Oh
you
my
don't
gosh.
know, right? So that's a hard thing. So
And
Alexis.
what a tough thing to have to learn to not trust your brain. You have to trust the other person you trust most in the world, which is your wife. That's something a lot of us can't even imagine. Marie has a question for Dr. Pawa. She would like to know if Parkinson's triggers dementia or Alzheimer's, or is it triggering similar symptoms?
So just like hallucinations and delusions can be a non-motor symptom of Parkinson's, memory issues and dementia can also be a non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. And patients who start having cognitive issues or dementia are much more likely to have these hallucinations. Now, pathologically, most of this, what we see is changes related to Parkinson's disease, but some of these patients can have some of the changes also associated from what would be Alzheimer's disease, but just not enough to say the person has clearly 2 different diseases.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
So here's a question, and I know we're going to be out of time in just a moment, but Brenda, I may have grown up at 1701 South Pearl, Independence, Missouri, 64050, later 64055.
Oh my guys.
About
that's
2 blocks
awesome.
away from the corner of Nolan and Gudgel.
Yeah.
I went to Truman High School. I understand that you may have had a similar geographic location growing up. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep. I lived on Pearl, on the other side of the street, the 3rd house up. So
Alexis,
that's amazing.
we really shouldn't have Brenda back on the program because she may know things about me that we don't need to tell everybody.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay, Brenda, did you ever see Dr. Stites when he was little, Steve Stites, before he was the Dr. Stites, like riding his bike around the street? And did you guys call him anything, like little Stevie or any nicknames?
No, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I think you're younger than me. And I really
Class of
didn't know you that
78,
well.
that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, you're 3 years younger than me. And I can't say, I just remember you. I remember your mom.
Yeah, my
And-
mom was cool.
She was. So anyway, I just remembered that name, and I always wondered, when I saw you during COVID, is that the one that lived down the street from me?
Yeah, that's the same goofy, nerdy kid. And just today I got my Star Trek cup right here. It says Chief Medical Officer on there for, Dr. McCoy. And so, yeah, I'm still the same nerdy, goofy kid I was back in 1960, 70, 80, 90, 20, 2010, 2025.
Oh, and that's really, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
A brilliant nerd.
Yeah, I don't know about brilliant, but got a darn good team around you. Hey, we're nearly out of time, though. I want to hear final thoughts before we go. And Brenda, I want to start with you because I think, and I'm going to speak for your husband, but I'm just going to say this is the expression of love that helps patients every day. So, Brenda.
Well, I'm glad that I'm healthy and I'm able to help him in any way I can and every way I can. And I'm so thankful that we were referred to Dr. Pawa because he's been so very, very kind and helpful. And he's, every time we tell him what's going on, he's trying to help us with switching some medication or adding medication. And so I just feel like this whole process has been easier being under his care. And I hope that what we've shared maybe helps somebody. I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely a journey. It's not always easy, but we're doing it together.
Thank you, and thanks for being on our program today, and thanks for being such a great testimony to the power of love. So, Dr. Ralph Reckman, sir, final thoughts.
Well, one thing that I find has been important for me in this journey is the fact that I have such good health care, and I just feel sorry for those who have don't have that kind of support, because it's been amazing. I look at others when I see their loneliness, and my heart goes out to them, because I know I'm richly blessed with more than I could have ever asked for. And thank you so much, Dr. Pawa.
All right, that's a pretty nice testimony too. So,
It is.
because you do a lot of great work here at the University of Kansas, and these patients are an example of that. But tell us your final thoughts today, sir.
Yeah, so I think we need to remember a couple of things. One, that Parkinson's, even though the symptoms we talk are motor, there are also non-motor symptoms that occur. Hallucinations and delusions can occur with Parkinson's. Of course, every patient with Parkinson's will not have it, but make sure you discuss this with your neurologist, even if they are very mild, even if they're happening once in a blue moon, but because you want to be treated early before you start losing the reality or before they become scary.
Yeah, so very true. Thanks again for being on this program. And I'm still a little upset with you because you age, but you don't age. And I don't understand how you've done that. Dr. Hawkeye.
Yeah, well, I would like to say that, you know, it looks like we are entering into the phase of decreased influenza. That is good, because I know a lot of people have been affected by that. Hopefully that trend will continue, and just as you said, Dr. Stites, hopefully the COVID infections will stay down as well. I would still encourage everybody to make sure they're up to date on all of their vaccines and all of their immunity to help protect them against those worst cases of disease. Remember, vaccines are not to protect you from getting infected. What they are meant is, when you do get infected, protect you from the disease process, and especially those most severe complications. We know we have a number of them out there. Just please talk with your medical providers or your local pharmacy, and just make sure you're up to date on all your vaccines.
Here's a story. Growing up at 1701 South Pearl in Independence, Missouri, I had nightmares about being a physician, and nightmares every time I watched Marcus Welby and MD that everybody died of an appendectomy in the world that night. Now, I didn't have Parkinson's, but what I've learned on the journey when I went to medical school and today is the power of medicine. When you take the power of medicine, and you combine it with love, you can do things that can move mountains and move worlds. I'm blessed to have been in medicine and have heard this conversation, because it reminds me of why I would never choose a different profession, because you get to witness modern day miracles every day in how people care for each other. We've said before on this program, faith, hope, and science. Really, it's faith, hope, love, and science that combine to make miracles happen and to help patients every moment of every day. So remember that when you hear all the doubts in the press, remember the power of faith, hope, love, and science. We'll see you again soon.
Finding joy through the challenges. I'm Alexis Del Cid on the next All Things Heart. How this young cardiology patient is now thriving. We'll show you her transition from her pediatric doctors to her heart doctors here at the health system has been seamless. Thursday at 8 a.m.